Hello, and welcome to Totally Got Out of Bed, a podcast for people who've lost someone to suicide and those that support them. I'm Tony Plant, and I lost my daughter, Anna, to suicide on January 30th of 2016.
And I'm Nora Flum, and I lost my son Eric on January 3rd, 2018. This is part 2 of episode 2. We're still learning how to do this, so bear with us. We originally recorded this as one long episode, and it turned out to be much longer than we intended, so we've split it into 2 parts.
So in part 1, we went into detail about the tragic events that surrounded the deaths of our kids. We know that could be hard to hear. It was hard for us to talk about. So if you decided to skip that part, good for you. Do whatever you can do to take care of yourself.
So before we start into the second part of the episode, let's talk a little bit about how we got started doing this. You know, neither Tony nor I have ever done any kind of podcasting before, so this is completely 100% new to us. So thank you for listening from the beginning. Thank you for being with us as we grow. We did this because we saw a huge need. So this idea was born out of an experience that I had on Facebook. I belong to a group of moms who lost their kids to suicide. Someone posted about an incident that she had with a family member. That family member asked her what she had accomplished. And like so many of us, in our anger and in our grief, we react like, screw that, you know. And so I messaged her with the response that Tony normally gives. I just wanted to say that I have a friend who taught me this phrase. You know, I don't mean to brag, but I totally got out of bed today. And that seemed to disarm any situation where somebody asked me what I've accomplished, because it allows me to say that I am barely hanging on. It kind of gives a little bit of humor, and it allows us to manage expectations. Well, that woman messaged back. She really appreciated what I had given her, that kind of a tool, and she asked if we knew of any book, or if I knew of any book that could talk about different tools and different ways or different ideas like that to help her cope. And I said, I really don't know of anything, because I, in my grief, did not do any bit of reading. No research, no reading about anything, no listening to anything. It was just the way I was trying to cope. I just did not turn to any expertise. Tony, on the other hand, read everything. It kind of became a standard joke that she read everything. And she would always preface what she would say, well, I read the other day that blah, blah, blah. And she is just a fount of knowledge. So I messaged her right away and said, do you know of any book that has these kinds of tools? And she said, no, I can't think of one. Let's write one. And I, in my naivete, said, oh, writing a book sounds like so much work. Let's just do a podcast. Well, here we are. It is a much bigger endeavor than what I had intended, but that's how we got started. There is a huge and unfortunately growing need for support for people who've lost loved ones to suicide. Now, both Tony and I lost our kids, but your story might be different. You know, maybe you lost a spouse, a partner, a friend, a parent, a colleague, a relative, or any person you loved, that you respected, or that you just knew. Or maybe you've lost someone, but not to suicide, and you found your way to us because it's important to know that you aren't alone in your grief. There are lots of things that are similar in grief, no matter how you've lost the person that you love. So regardless of why you're here, we are so very terribly sorry for your loss. Welcome to the club. We're sorry you're here.
Very true, Nora. Oh, that is so good. And the other thing I want to add to that, so if the person that you lost to suicide was your first cousin once removed, and that relationship was super important to you, and you feel like it has affected you greatly, and you want to be on this podcast, awesome. Because there's no one that can say you weren't close enough to that person to feel bad about their suicide, because that is a personal thing, and everybody's loss of someone to suicide is different. So you have every right to be here just like anybody else.
And along with that, no matter how long ago your loss was, some people don't face their loss for a very long time, and they finally decide years later that that was something that they didn't deal with appropriately when it happened, and it for some reason is just getting to them now. We have had people in our support group come who've lost people 20 years before and have just started coming to group because they never dealt with the loss appropriately at the time. So wherever you are in your story, we are glad you're here.
Great. So, quick rundown as long as we're, talking about a little bit of housekeeping and how we got here. So, just a quick rundown on some ground rules. So, swearing is definitely going to happen on this podcast. So, really sorry if that is a problem for you, but try to just ignore it if you can. Because, that stock answer that I have to everything that happens to me, how are you? Is living the fucking dream. So it's not really very realistic for me not to swear. Some things just require a big swear word, and you just feel better after it happens, particularly after a suicide loss. And secondly, since we are only experts by experience, please don't take what we say as fact. Everybody is different, and everyone experiences grief different. These are just our experiences. This is meant to be descriptive and not prescriptive. We're just describing what we've experienced. Your experience is different. We don't pretend to tell you what to do. We hope you pick up a tool or two for your grief toolbox. And third, everyone's trauma is different. Remember this. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. Whatever your experience is, it's absolutely fine. The timing is fine. The depth is fine. It's all fine. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Thank you, Tony. It's important for us to remember. And with that, let's roll into episode 2, part 2, where we talk about the takeaways from the first few days after our loss.
So we both told a little bit of what happened when we lost our kids. And now just kind of maybe we can talk back and forth, Nora, about how we dealt with it and what worked for us. One of the things that you said that I just want to touch on a little bit is how do you say what happened? Do you call it a suicide? Nora's case was a little bit different. With Anna's situation, we knew that it was suicide. There was no question about that. But what do you say then? How do you write the obituary? What are you going to say about it? So for us, it was pretty automatic that we were going to let people know that basically she died of mental health issues. And so what we did, instead of saying she died by suicide, we said in the obituary she lost her battle with depression and took her own life. It just seemed a little bit not quite as, I don't know, brash or something.
Yeah,
So that's what we put in the obituary.
that term suicide is so hard for people to wrap their minds around, and the how do you talk about it? I know that I think we all grew up hearing the term committed suicide, and I think we've come a long way, and we've realized that committed suicide is probably not the best way to describe it because that makes it sound like they've committed a crime, and it is not. I mean, I hate to say that it's not a crime, it's obviously horrible, but it is not something that can be associated with committing anything. So that's not helpful. Saying committed suicide is not necessarily helpful. Some people say completed suicide, and I'm not really crazy about that term either because it sounds then that it's something that they have planned and it's not always something that they have planned or that they have planned with a mind able to make those kinds of plans. So I have started saying he was a victim of suicide. That seems to describe it better.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That completed thing makes it sound like, well, he checked that off his list.
Yeah.
And that sits weird with me as well. And I want to add to that it doesn't mean I'm good at not saying that they committed suicide, because it slips for me on occasion as well. But I do make an effort to say that he died by suicide or she died by suicide, if at all possible.
Yeah.
So some of the other things that we learned, what would you say, Nora? What would you say on a big takeaway of everything?
Well, you know that psychologists tell us that in the face of threat, we have the fight or flight response. And I'm not sure that that's entirely accurate. This is not fight or flight because I think that there is a third option, and that is build community. And so, in the face of this kind of trauma, in the face of this kind of threat, I didn't feel like I was either fighting or fleeing. I felt like I was reaching out, connecting, and building community, and my friends in our communities rallied around us. And here's where I want
Mm-hmm.
to talk about a little bit about what your situation is. If you have lost somebody to suicide now, we're in COVID right now, and your need to be surrounded by people may not go fulfilled at this point. And so I think it's important to talk about, is COVID insulating or isolating? I wonder if COVID helps protect us from the outside world because we don't have to face people on a daily basis. But I'd like to hear from people about whether they feel like this situation that we're in now makes them feel more lonely or makes them feel more protected. And maybe it's both, because you know that we're never the same. Sometimes we're not the same minute to minute, so it could be both and. It doesn't necessarily have to be either or.
Right. Yeah, and you know what, that's so true. That's such a good point because my biggest takeaway from everything is that people are just so damn nice. And I think about if it was today, I think people would still be nice, don't get me wrong, but the types of niceness would be different and not extremely fulfilling for me. It's like I loved that people brought food. I loved that they brought Kleenex and toilet paper and all those things that we needed, but I loved that they were there.
Yeah.
That's the part I loved the most, is that just having people around. And for me, it was like the kids because she was 15. So if her friends came over or the cousins came over, that was really important to me because I wanted to have those kids around because it, reminded me of her. So that would be really hard. I think, if it had happened today, I think I would have had to say fuck COVID because I don't know that I would have been able to get through without having people around.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know either. You know, but then again, we didn't know that we could get through the loss of a child. So here we are.
True.
We don't have a choice. You just do what you have to do, and if all you can do today is get out of bed, then that's all you can do today. And
Yeah.
that's just, it is what it is. People say, "Oh, you're so strong," and I say, no, no. I get up, I breathe, I do, and I learn to compartmentalize. I learn to think that I have to get through this next task, and to set my grief aside for a minute to get through this next task. But then again, that grief takes the space it needs, so you can't put it aside completely because it comes back.
Yep. I love that word compartmentalize because that's so true. You definitely have to put stuff aside. You just have to make a list in your head and say, now I'm going to brush my teeth.
Right.
Now I'm going to go in the other room.
Yeah.
And that if you don't do it, for me, that's how it was anyway. If I didn't do it that way, it didn't get done.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Speaking of meals, I remember, you know, people didn't give us a choice. People said, we are bringing meals. I had friends set up a
mhm.
schedule, and they continued with those meals through maybe 6 or 8 weeks. And thank God for those. I don't know that it wouldn't occur to me to eat. The only reason I ate was so that their food wouldn't go to waste. I don't imagine. I don't, yeah, I can't imagine having gotten through without those kinds of acts of love from my
Yep.
colleagues and my family and my friends.
Yep. We had that too, that meal chain thing, and it was very helpful. Otherwise, you don't remember to eat for sure. So I guess, when you say that, I think that's back to the people being so nice thing.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like they want to help. They're
yeah,
nice. They want to help, and they sometimes don't know how to help. So I found it kind of important for me to make sure that people knew how they could help. So I would ask for what I want. Like in the first few weeks, I would say, okay, you guys, this is Friday night thing is really sucks for me right now. I need somebody to help me on Friday nights. I
but
can't be
that,
by
Tony,
myself.
will be our next episode. That how we get through the first few weeks, because I think we're
Right.
still, let's focus on the first week. So a little teaser for next week's
Yep.
episode. One thing I do remember
Yes,
about the first
exactly.
week too is the idea that life went on for everybody else. Here, my life was shattered. I felt like a bomb had exploded inside my life, and everybody else was going on their business like nothing had happened. And I remember we had to go shopping. We needed to get a frame for the picture that we would have on the altar or at the front of the church for his funeral. So we were buying a frame at Michael's. And nobody wants to have to do that. Nobody wants to have to buy anything like that. But here we are, my husband and I are together because I wouldn't leave his side and he wouldn't leave mine. And we're going through the checkout, and the wonderful salesperson, so do you need anything else? Have a good day. And here we are in the midst of this horrible, horrific experience of buying a frame, you know, and have a good
Right.
day. And we looked at each other when we left, and my husband said something very profound. He said, people used to wear black armbands, and people used to then recognize that the person you were dealing with is grieving, and you treat them differently. It means that their life is not the same, and you treat them with kid gloves. You treat them with compassion and consolation, and it's not normal.
Yep.
And people being normal was really, really hard for me to take at first, especially that first few weeks.
Yep. And that's so right. It's like we suck at grief in this society.
We
That
totally,
black armband thing, yeah.
totally,
Black armband thing is great idea.
yeah, totally do. Some things that people say that are helpful, or that I found helpful. Um, First of all, people say, I can't imagine. I'm so very sorry for your loss. I can't imagine. That's certainly better than I know just how you feel, because obviously they can't.
Right. Right.
But you know what? In my heart, in my cynical heart, and in my anger at the initial part of the grief, I kept thinking to myself, oh, you can imagine, and it scares the shit out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, but you just smile and say thank you. Another thing that I remember people saying, and I know, looking back, I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to build empathy. They were trying to show that they have concern for you. But in order to do that, sometimes they start telling you their own loss, yes, or their own dealings with suicide, or even their own suicide attempts. They tell you these stories, and I didn't have the bandwidth to deal with them. I don't remember who said what, and I don't remember their stories at all, but I remember barely able to take that. In retrospect, I recognize that it was part of their trying to empathize with me, to share empathy, and to give me hope that their tragedy was certainly difficult, but that they survived and that they are still here and that they are a symbol that life will go on. But it was so hard to take at the time.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree.
Anything else you
So,
remember for the first week or so that we want to, before we bring
oh, you
this
know
to a
what? One
close?
more thing.
Yeah.
For me, I'm kind of a planner. And the one other thing that was better for me is kind of planning a response. Because, after the first few days of having her die, it was like, okay, people are going to just say, I'm so sorry. And, that's great. That's better than, like Nora said, it's way better than having them say, I know how you feel. But for me, in my head, I had to kind of have a script because I didn't know what I was going to say, and it gets very awkward. So when people would ask me, which they do, even though they're your friends and they know how you are, they're still going to ask you, how you doing? And then I just had this pat response. It was living the fucking dream because that kind of took the edge off it. Everybody laughed, and then we kind of could move on and get to whatever it is we needed to discuss next. So to me, I think having a plan like that was very helpful.
Yeah. Having an escape plan for every situation that you have to deal with that
Oh,
first week
good.
is also very important. If you know that you're going to
Yep.
be in a group of people, just having a reason, having a place to go, and maybe a signal to somebody that you care about that can take you away. And again, of course, with COVID, you might not have to deal with this at the same level that we do when we had to deal with people. But having an escape room or escape plan just to say, I'm done right now. I gotta go.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
All right, with that, I think we'll start bringing this episode to a close. We appreciate your listening to us. Remember that if you or someone you know is in immediate danger, please call 911 or go to the nearest emergency room. If you are considering suicide, if you are in that dark place that we are talking about, please call 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. In Spanish, 1-888-628-9454. The Lifeline is free, and it is a confidential crisis hotline that is available to everyone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or you can text HELLO to 741-741. That text hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the U.S. And the crisis text line serves anyone in any type of crisis. Please, please, please reach out for help.
And we'd like to thank our extremely talented team, Wendy Wolf, our tech guru, Monica Lavorsi, the composer and performer behind our theme song, Hold My Hand Now, and a special thank you to Survivor Resources, the group that continues to support us and others in the wake of our tragedies. Thanks for listening today. Please join us next time when we'll ask the question, what's happening to my life? Getting through the first few weeks and months. Have as good a day as you can, smile when you can, and cry when you have to.
Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now and be as one. The colors start to fade. Gray is the only shade that you see now. Lost in the charade of the journeyman's parade, can't see a way out. As you keep marching onward, oh, all you gotta do is reach out and hold my hand now. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand now and be as one. Hold my hand now. Hold my hand. The tracks begin to sway. You're in the middle of the fray, so hold on tight now. Your grip begins to slip. You tumble towards the lip of the open train, and how? But before the world swallows you up, reach out, there's a place